You wake before dawn because the smell wakes you. Not birds, not church bells, not some poetic medieval sunrise. The smell. You are lying on a straw mattress that has absorbed years of sweat, spilled ale, and whatever else bodies release when doors are locked and candles burn low. Beneath the bed sits a wooden bucket. It is not decorative. It is not symbolic. It is the family latrine. You shift your weight, and the wood creaks. The bucket answers with a soft slosh. Romance, medieval edition. The room is stone, cold even in summer. A rush mat covers patches of dirt floor. Smoke from last night's hearth still clings to the ceiling like a low gray cloud that forgot to leave. You inhale it with the sharp tang of urine and human waste rising from below you. This is not an accident. This is design. In crowded towns like 14th century London, space is survival. The privy is where you can fit it. You swing your legs off the bed. Your bare foot brushes the side of the bucket. Welcome to intimacy. It is the year 1348. The Black Death is moving through Europe like a silent army. Fleas carry it. Rats carry it. People carry it. No one knows that yet. What they know is this: bodies rot fast, and God must be angry. You share this room with a spouse. Marriage is not primarily about love. It is about property, alliance, children. The church has been tightening its grip on sexuality for centuries now. By the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, marriage is firmly under ecclesiastical control. Consent matters, but so does obedience. Sex is permitted. Pleasure is tolerated. Excess is sin. There are rules, positions deemed unnatural, times forbiddens. No intercourse during Lent. No intercourse during menstruation. No intercourse on feast days. No intercourse before confession. You would think God personally monitors the bedroom. Given the smell, he probably keeps his distance. You look at your partner in the dim light, hair unwashed for weeks, maybe months. Medieval people did bathe, yes. Public bathhouses were common in cities like Paris and Cologne during the 12th and 13th centuries. But by the late 14th century, after waves of plague, public baths become suspect. Warm water, shared bodies, steam. It feels sinful. It feels dangerous. Authorities begin to close them. Moral reformers call them dens of vice. So you wash less. Clothes are changed more often than skin. Linen undergarments absorb sweat and are easier to rinse than flesh. Full immersion baths might happen a few times a year, sometimes less. Water is heavy. Heating it requires fuel. And physicians warn that hot water opens the pores, letting disease slip inside. 3-year-old bathwater? Not quite, but close enough in spirit. Stagnant tubs reused by multiple family members. The wealthy perfume themselves. The poor rely on hope. And still, you touch each other. Because desire does not disappear just because the room smells like a stable. You lean close. You taste salt and smoke. You try not to breathe too deeply. Bodies here are not curated. They are functional. Scarred, calloused, occasionally infected. Skin diseases are common. Lice are nearly universal. You scratch. So does your partner. This is the part modern fantasies skip. There's no rose petal fantasy. There's breath thick with ale and onion. There are teeth not quite straight. There are hands that have cleaned fish guts and emptied chamber pots. And yet, there is warmth. In a world where death arrives suddenly, where plague pits fill overnight, the act of holding someone becomes rebellion. The church teaches that sex within marriage is for procreation. But you know the truth. It is also for comfort. For proof you are still alive. Some theologians like Thomas Aquinas argue that pleasure is a secondary effect of the procreative act. Tolerated, not celebrated. Too much enthusiasm hints at lust. Lust hints at corruption. Corruption invites punishment. So you learn restraint. You move carefully. Quietly, the bucket under the bed shifts again. Somewhere in town, a priest warns that unclean bodies invite demons. Physicians prescribe bloodletting for imbalance of humors. Bad smells are thought to cause disease. Miasma theory dominates. If illness floats in foul air, then your bedroom is a battlefield. You feel a flicker of fear. What if intimacy itself is contamination? In London, city ordinances attempt to regulate waste disposal. Chamber pots are meant to be emptied into designated pits or directly into the Thames. In practice, windows open. Streets receive what gravity offers. Rain spreads it. Dogs lick it. Children step in it. The same hands that prepare bread have touched waste. You kiss those hands, because love does not wait for sanitation infrastructure. But here's what matters. In this world, hygiene and morality intertwine. Filth is not just physical, it is spiritual. Dirt on skin suggests dirt in soul. The church's language reinforces it. Purity, cleansing, sin as stain. And when plague arrives, the logic hardens. God punishes through rot. So couples pray after intercourse. Some confess. Some abstain entirely during outbreaks. Others double down, desperate for children before death takes them. You lie back on straw that has absorbed the history of your marriage. Beneath you, the bucket breathes quietly in the dark. Outside, bells begin to ring, not for prayer, for the dead. And as you listen, you begin to wonder whether the true danger in this room is the smell, or the belief that your own body is unclean. Because once a society decides that desire equals dirt, it starts looking for someone to blame, and it will find them. Bathhouses, brothels, and blame. You walk through the narrow streets of 14th century Paris. The Seine glimmers to your left, deceptively beautiful. Waste flows into it daily. Tanneries dump chemicals. Butchers discard blood. Still, it is the city's artery. Ahead, a wooden sign creaks, a painted tub. A hint of steam curling upward. The bathhouse. In the 12th and 13th centuries, bathhouses were common across Europe. Inspired partly by Roman tradition and partly by simple practicality, they offered hot water, shared basins, sometimes even food and drink. Men and women might bathe separately, sometimes not. Records from German cities suggest mixed bathing was not unusual. You enter, heat wraps around you. For a moment, the outside world fades. Sweat loosens grime. Muscles soften. You almost feel clean. Because bathhouses are not just about washing. They are social spaces, negotiation spaces, sometimes sexual spaces. Moralists complain constantly. Preachers warn that steam hides sin. By the late Middle Ages, especially after the Black Death, suspicion intensifies. Authorities in cities like London and Paris begin closing public baths, citing both immorality and disease. Two problems. One convenient solution. Blame the bathers. You sink into a wooden tub. The water is cloudy. It has been used. It will be used again. Soap exists but is not universal. Herbs float on the surface to mask odor. Rosemary, lavender. Cover scent is doing heavy lifting here. Across the room, a couple laughs too loudly. A priest passing by might call it indecency. A physician might call it unhealthy. A civic official might call it disorderly. You call it human. But the narrative is shifting. As plague cycles return in waves through the 14th and 15th centuries, public authorities look for control. Brothels are regulated rather than banned outright in some cities. In London's Southwark district, licensed brothels known as stews operate under official oversight. Sex work is tolerated, taxed, contained. Because here's the contradiction. Sexuality is condemned in sermons, but managed in practice. The church insists on marital sex for procreation. Yet urban governments recognize that unmarried men, soldiers, laborers will seek release. Better to confine it. Control, not elimination. You pass a brothel door. Red cloth hangs above it. Inside, straw pallets line the walls. Cleanliness is relative. Sheets may be changed. Bodies are not scrubbed between clients. Disease spreads quietly. Syphilis will erupt in Europe at the end of the 15th century with terrifying speed. But even before that, other infections circulate. They do not have microscopes, they have moral frameworks. If a man develops sores, it is punishment. If a woman is suspected of spreading illness, she is labeled corrupt. Female sexuality becomes the easy target. Medieval medical texts often portray women as wetter, colder, more porous, more susceptible to imbalance, more dangerous. Translation: if something goes wrong, blame her body. You leave the bathhouse and step into cooler air. Bells ring from Notre Dame. Confession lines grow longer during plague years. Priests ask about sins of the flesh. How often? With what intent? With what pleasure? Intent matters. Pleasure is suspicious. You imagine lying in a confessional booth, whispering about your marriage bed while outside. Carts collect corpses. Perspective feels skewed. But for medieval minds, the link is clear. God sends plague. Plague cleanses sin. Sexual excess invites wrath. Therefore, regulate sex and you might survive. You start to see it everywhere. Sumptuary laws regulating clothing, especially for women accused of prostitution. Penalties for adultery. Public shaming rituals. In some towns, suspected sex workers must wear distinct markers. Control the visible body to manage invisible disease. And yet, behind closed doors, people continue. Because repression does not erase desire, it concentrates it. In rural villages, young couples engage in practices like bundling. Courting in bed fully clothed, sometimes separated by a board. A compromise between supervision and nature, parents nearby. Candles low, hands exploring in the dark, risk wrapped in rules. You laugh quietly at the irony. In a world terrified of contamination, people share beds freely. Whole families sleep in one room. Servants sleep near masters. Privacy is luxury. Intimacy is communal whether you want it or not. The air carries smoke, sweat, and rumor spreads faster than fleas. A widow down the street bathes too often. Suspicious. A midwife knows too much about women's bodies. Dangerous. A couple without children must be cursed. The line between hygiene and heresy blurs. Because if disease is divine judgment, someone must be guilty. And once a society decides that sexual impurity causes physical rot, the next step is inevitable. You glance back at the bathhouse as city officials nail a notice to its door. Closed until further order. The steam fades. The blame does not. The marriage bed and the law. You kneel in a stone church in 15th century England. The priest's voice echoes off cold walls. He speaks of order, of hierarchy, of proper union. Marriage is not just a private agreement. It is a public contract. Canon law governs it. By this period, the Church has established that mutual consent creates marriage, but consummation seals it. Sex transforms a promise into reality. You could say the law waits in your bedroom. After the ceremony, neighbors expect proof. In some regions, witnesses may escort you to the marital bed. Bedding rituals are festive, awkward, communal. Privacy arrives late, if at all. The room smells faintly better tonight. Fresh rushes have been laid. The bucket beneath the bed has been emptied. Small victories. You sit beside your new spouse. You barely know them. This is not unusual. Alliances matter more than affection. You study their face in candlelight, trying to map the future. The Church teaches that marital debt exists. If one spouse requests intimacy, the other must not refuse without valid reason. Paul's letters are cited. Denial may push a partner toward sin. So even within marriage, desire is obligation. Romance is duty. Sexy, right? You attempt closeness. Your hands are nervous. The straw mattress crackles beneath you. Outside, someone laughs too loudly, waiting for evidence that the union is complete. And here is the psychological weight. If consummation does not occur, the marriage can be annulled. If impotence is suspected, examinations may follow. Courts hear testimony about private acts. Bodies become legal evidence. Your performance is not just personal. It is public risk. Meanwhile, hygiene remains secondary. People wash hands before meals more often than they wash their entire bodies. Linen shifts absorb fluids. Those fluids linger. Bedding is reused. Mattresses are rarely replaced. Parasites thrive in warm straw. You try not to think about it. You focus instead on legacy. Children secure inheritance. They ensure labor on land. They anchor family names. Infertility invites suspicion. Women bear most of that suspicion. Medical theory describes the womb as a wandering organ capable of causing hysteria if unsatisfied. The cure, some say, is marital intercourse. So now sex is therapy. You begin to see how layered this becomes. Hygiene fears mingle with reproductive pressure. Disease is punishment. Childlessness is punishment. Pleasure is dangerous. Abstinence is suspicious if prolonged. There is no winning. During plague outbreaks, some couples rush to conceive before death arrives. Others abstain, fearing that conception during sickness produces cursed offspring. Medical texts debate it. Clergy preach restraint. You lie back after the act, listening to your own breath. The room smells of sweat and wax. You are not certain whether you feel closer or simply more entangled. Here's the darker layer. When disease spreads, authorities sometimes regulate who may marry. In certain towns, those visibly ill are discouraged or forbidden. Bodies become categorized: clean, unclean, worthy, risky. Sound familiar? You think about the chamber pot beneath the bed again. The quiet symbol of everything unspoken. Waste hidden in domestic space. Desire hidden under doctrine. Your spouse turns toward you. There is tenderness in the dark, genuine, unexpected, not commanded by law, not supervised by priest, just warmth. And in that moment, you realize something. The system may control the framework. It may dictate when and how and why, but it cannot fully script what happens between two people in candlelight, unless fear grows strong enough, and fear is growing. Because whispers are spreading through town of a woman who bathes alone in the river at night. And men who visit her cottage afterward begin to cough. The midwife and the river. You follow the path beyond the village where reeds bend over black water. The moon hangs low. The river smells cleaner than the streets, but not by much. Still, it moves. Movement feels like purity. She stands waist-deep in the current. Marjorie, widow, midwife, 40 years old, which in your village makes her ancient and suspiciously resilient. She bathes at night. Alone. That alone is enough to spark talk. Midwives occupy a dangerous position in medieval society. They understand bodies. They know herbs that ease pain, stimulate labor, sometimes prevent conception. Official church teaching condemns contraception. Procreation is the purpose of marriage. Interference is sin. Yet women still seek control. Marjorie has helped deliver dozens of children. She has seen blood and afterbirth and death. She has whispered instructions to terrified brides. She has likely heard confessions that never reached a priest. Knowledge is power. Power invites scrutiny. You approach the riverbank. She turns slowly. Her hair clings to her shoulders. She does not look ashamed that you ask why she bathes here instead of in a tub at home. She laughs softly. Says the river does not hold yesterday's filth, that it flows. Simple logic. Revolutionary in a stagnant town. But recently, several men who visited her for remedies have fallen ill. Fever. Swollen glands. One died. The priest suggests divine punishment. The villagers murmur about unclean practices. Bathing too often. Touching too many bodies. Knowing too much about women's cycles. Witchcraft is a word not yet fully weaponized, but it lingers in the air. You walk beside her as she leaves the water. She speaks plainly. Disease spreads because people live close, because waste is not managed, because no one understands invisible causes. You almost believe her. Then again, invisible causes are terrifying. Easier to blame a person than admit ignorance. In the 15th century, witch trials begin to increase in parts of Europe. Not yet the full hysteria of the 16th and 17th centuries, but the groundwork is laid. Manuals like the later Malleus Maleficarum will claim that women, especially those associated with sexuality or childbirth, are prone to diabolical influence. Midwives fit too neatly into that narrative. Marjorie dries herself with a rough cloth. She tells you that women confide in her about painful marital duties, about husbands who interpret marital debt as license, about infections that burn and do not heal. She applies salves. She advises rest, sometimes abstinence. You see the threat clearly now. If she encourages women to limit intercourse for health, she disrupts doctrine. If she offers herbal knowledge that prevents conception, she challenges control. If she bathes freely, she rejects the idea that cleanliness is sin. Rebellion can look like soap. Back in the village, rumors solidify. A council meeting is called. The priest references scripture about purity. He speaks of Eve, of temptation, of how women's bodies invite chaos if not regulated. Marjorie stands silent as accusations gather like storm clouds. You feel the tension in your gut, because you know this is not just about one woman. It is about fear, about plague, about sex and sickness, and the need for someone to carry blame. The crowd demands answers. Why do men fall ill after visiting her? Why does she wash in flowing water like a pagan? Why do some wives suddenly speak of refusing their husbands during outbreaks? Control is slipping, and when control slips, power tightens its grip. That night, as torches flare outside her cottage, you realize the truth. Hygiene was never just about dirt. It was about who decides what is clean. And tomorrow, they will decide whether Marjorie is. Trial by stench morning comes gray and thin. You stand in the village square as Marjorie is brought forward. Not in chains, not yet, but flanked by men who have already decided what she is. The air smells of damp wool and wood smoke. Somewhere close, a gutter overflows. Waste trickles through mud. No one comments on that. The priest reads aloud concerns about impurity. Not formal witchcraft charges. That comes later in history, with tribunals and manuals and systematic hunts. This is earlier, Messier, local. But the logic is the same. Men visited her. Men grew sick. She bathes in flowing water at night. She advises women on their bodies without male oversight. Conclusion: suspicious. You glance around the crowd. These are not monsters. They are farmers, mothers, boys with dirt under their nails. They are scared. In 14th and 15th century Europe, medical knowledge is limited. University-trained physicians rely on Galenic humoral theory. Health depends on balance: hot, cold, wet, dry. Women are believed to be colder and wetter by nature, more porous, more susceptible to corruption. That word again. Porous. As if disease seeps in through moral weakness. Marjorie stands straight. She does not look like rot. She looks tired. A man shouts that she encouraged his wife to abstain during his fever. Another claims she gave herbs to prevent conception. A third whispers that she touched him during treatment and his body burned afterward. Burning is a symptom of infection. But here, it becomes accusation. You feel the structure forming. If disease is caused by foul air, and foul air is a sign of sin, and she associates with bodies and blood and night bathing, then she must be the conduit. Medieval towns had public ordinances about waste disposal, yes, but enforcement was inconsistent. Chamber pots emptied into streets, privies overflowed, wells were contaminated. Livestock shared space with humans. Hygiene was practical but imperfect. Yet instead of overhauling infrastructure, people overhaul reputations. Marjorie speaks finely. She explains that flowing water is cleaner than stagnant tubs. That illness spreads in close quarters. That fever should not be met with forced intimacy. Forced intimacy. The phrase hangs in the air like smoke. You see some women lower their eyes, because marital obligation is real. canon law supports it. Refusal without cause can be grounds for complaint. But what qualifies as cause? Fever? Sores? Fear? Fear rarely counts. The priest responds carefully. He does not outright condemn her. He questions her authority. Who granted her the right to advise on marital matters? Who sanctioned her remedies? Authority is the real battlefield. In late medieval Europe, church courts oversee moral conduct. They hear cases of adultery, impotence, annulment. Bodies become testimony. Midwives sometimes serve as examiners in disputes over virginity or consummation. Their knowledge is useful, but it must be subordinate. Marjorie's independence threatens that balance. You notice something else. The men accusing her are not the poorest. They are middling landholders. They have something to lose. Control slipping inside their homes feels dangerous. If wives begin to question the timing of intercourse during sickness, what next? If women seek herbal knowledge, will they also seek autonomy? Disease becomes the excuse. The council does not condemn her outright. Not yet. Instead, they impose restriction. She is forbidden from practicing without oversight. Bathing at night is deemed improper. She must attend confession weekly. Control restored, at least publicly. The crowd disperses. No flames, no gallows. Just tightened reins. You walk home through streets that still smell like human waste and animal blood. Nothing about the sanitation has changed. Only the scapegoat. That night, in your own bed, you hesitate before touching your spouse. Fever has brushed the village again. You remember Marjorie's words about abstinence during illness. You also remember the priest's sermon about marital duty. Between doctrine and survival, you choose quickly. Or maybe you pretend to choose freely. You lie together, careful but close. The bucket beneath the bed is freshly emptied. Small mercy. But as you drift towards sleep, you realize something darker. The system does not need to burn women to control them. That it only needs to redefine cleanliness as obedience. And somewhere beyond the village, in cities larger and dirtier than this one, new diseases are preparing to rewrite the rules entirely. The pox and the panic. You are in 1495. Naples. French troops under King Charles VIII have marched into Italy. Armies move. Camps swell. Sex follows soldiers the way smoke follows fire. Then comes the pox. Painful sores. Ulcers. Rashes that spread like a map of private shame across the skin. Contemporary observers describe faces collapsing, noses disintegrating. Whether exaggerated or not, the fear is real. What we now identify as syphilis explodes across Europe at the end of the 15th century. No one calls it syphilis yet. The Italians blame the French. The French blame the Italians. Others blame Spaniards. Or Turks, or Jews, or sex workers. No one blames infrastructure. You walk through a crowded street where a man hides lesions beneath his cap. A woman wraps cloth around her jaw. Physicians debate causes. Some argue it is divine punishment for rampant immorality. Others theorize celestial alignment. Astrology still shapes medicine. The heavens must be involved. Because if it is purely human behavior, then reform must be human too. And that is harder. Brothels begin to close in some cities. In others, regulation intensifies. Women suspected of carrying disease are examined, inspected, marked, sometimes expelled. Men, of course, are treated as victims of temptation. Consistency has never been the church's strong suit. Medical treatments are brutal. Mercury ointments applied to sores. Patients placed in hot rooms to sweat out corruption. Salivation induced deliberately. Teeth fall out. Gums rot. The cure can kill as efficiently as the disease. You imagine lying on a straw pallet, body burning, while a physician assures you that the suffering is cleansing. Cleanliness again. Always cleanliness. The link between sexuality and decay hardens. Sermons become sharper. Sex outside marriage is not merely sin now, it is contagion. Even within marriage, suspicion creeps in. If a husband falls ill, did he stray? If a wife develops symptoms, Did she bring corruption into the home? Trusty roads. You sit beside your spouse one evening and examine each other's skin by candlelight. Every blemish feels ominous. Intimacy becomes inspection. Romantic, isn't it? But here's what matters. The pox forces a reckoning. Disease clearly spreads through sexual contact. Even without microscopes, patterns emerge. People notice clusters around brothels, armies, ports. Control escalates. In some regions, sumptuary laws tighten. Clothing markers for sex workers become stricter. Public penance rituals increase. Women accused of promiscuity may be paraded or shorn. The body becomes billboard for warning. Meanwhile, hygiene practices slowly shift. Not because of compassion, because of fear. Some elites begin advocating more frequent washing, though still cautious about full immersion. Linen changes become more emphasized. Perfume industries grow. Scent masks anxiety. You realize something unsettling. The filth has always been there. The buckets under beds, the shared bathwater, the open sewers. But now, with a disease tied directly to sex, morality and medicine fuse in a new way. Sex is no longer just spiritually risky, that it is visibly dangerous. And in that danger, power finds leverage. You pass a church where a preacher rails against lust as the gateway to bodily ruin. He does not mention the soldiers who spread the infection. He does not mention the lack of sanitation. He does not mention that marital rape is still not recognized as crime in most places. He mentions women's modesty. Predictable. At home, you and your spouse lie back to back. The space between you feels larger than before, not because love is gone, because fear sits in the bed with you. You remember Marjorie by the river, her insistence on flowing water, on abstaining during illness, on listening to bodies rather than sermons. You wonder where she is now, because as cities fill with patients whose flesh seems to dissolve under divine judgment, people are again asking who is unclean. And the answer is rarely neutral. Secrets in the straw. You think repression would end desire. It does not. It mutates it. In 16th century villages across England and parts of colonial America later on, young couples still find ways to meet. Barn lofts, forest edges, shared beds during courtship. Bundling boards placed between bodies to preserve virtue while allowing proximity. Rules adapt. Desire adapts faster. You lie in a loft above livestock, the smell of hay mixing with animal heat. Your partner's hand inches toward yours under a blanket. The church says wait. Your pulse says now. You both know the risks. Pregnancy outside marriage invites scandal. Disease lingers in whispers. Yet the need for closeness in a world of hard labor and sudden death is overwhelming. Here's the irony. Even as sermons intensify about sexual purity, daily hygiene remains inconsistent. Colonists in early American settlements like Jamestown in the 17th century struggle with sanitation. Waste disposal is rudimentary. Water sources are contaminated. Illness is common. And still, moral panic centers on bodies in bed. You kiss quietly, tasting smoke from the hearth fire clinging to skin. There is dirt under fingernails. There is probably bacteria you cannot name, but there is also defiance. Some women learn herbal methods quietly passed from older generations. Pennyroyal, savin, risky. Plants used to influence fertility. Officially condemned. Privately circulated. Marjorie was not alone. In court records from early modern England, women are occasionally charged not only with fornication, but with using charms or potions related to love or conception. The line between medicine and magic remains thin. Knowledge travels in whispers. You feel that whisper now. A subtle resistance beneath obedience. Couples timing intercourse around illness despite sermons. Women delaying pregnancies in famine years. Men visiting licensed brothels despite public shame, because regulation is easier than suppression. Human behavior does not erase under decree. It bends. But bending creates tension. And tension creates backlash. In New England colonies, moral codes grow strict. Puritan communities regulate sexuality fiercely. Fornication punished. Adultery sometimes capital crime. Yet court records show steady cases of premarital sex, fines levied, confessions extracted. Desire refuses extinction. You roll onto your back in the loft and stare at wooden beams above. You think about all the systems designed to contain this moment. Canon law, civic ordinances, sermons about rot and divine wrath, medical theories about imbalance and porous female flesh. And yet here you are, two bodies in a world that smells perpetually of smoke and waste. Choosing warmth anyway. Maybe that is the quiet revolution, not grand speeches, not public defiance, just continued touch and defiance of fear. But revolutions rarely go unanswered. Because when institutions cannot eliminate desire, they redefine it. And the next phase will not focus on filth alone. It will focus on purity as identity. And once purity becomes identity, the stakes turn lethal.